Welcome to Movie Deep Dive on Binge Radio, where we dive deep on cinema. I mean, imagine just erasing the love of your life from
Right,
existence.
just totally gone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Giving up all your friends, retreating into this squalid little apartment where absolutely no one knows your name, and you do all of this just so you can spend your nights getting completely bruised and battered, protecting a city that doesn't even know you exist.
It's a totally devastating premise for a
It
character.
really is. So today we are looking at how a studio took literally the most universally hated comic book plotline of the 2000s and somehow mutated it into a billion-dollar emotionally devastating masterpiece.
It is the absolute definition of a creative left turn. And what's fascinating here is that audiences who we were told were totally burned out on superheroes completely embraced this dark, challenging vision.
Yeah, they really did.
I mean, if we just look at the staggering box office reality we're dealing with, this 2026 film, Spider-Man, Brand New Day, it pulled in a $360 million domestic opening weekend.
Wait, that's just domestic.
It's just domestic. That dethroned Avengers Endgame. And globally, it raked in $932 million right out of the gate.
Which is just an unbelievable flex for a movie that feels, this hostile to the standard blockbuster formula.
Oh, absolutely.
So our mission for you on this deep dive is to figure out exactly how the filmmakers pulled off this magic trick. Like, how did this movie completely shatter the dreaded superhero fatigue?
That is the million-dollar question. Or, well, the billion-dollar question.
Right, exactly. And how did they translate this messy, controversial 2008 publishing stunt into what critics are basically calling a grounded, mature, and occasionally terrifying cinematic triumph?
Well, to really understand that success, we have to look at the incredibly cynical environment this film was released into.
Oh, for sure.
Because for the last few years, we've been living through what The Ringer brilliantly coined the superhero swoon.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if you've been going to the movies at all lately, you have felt that swoon.
Oh, yeah, everyone has.
You know that feeling of walking into a theater and realizing you need to have watched, like, 3 separate streaming shows just to understand why a side character is holding a glowing cube?
It's exhausting.
Audiences were exhausted. The sprawling, interconnected cinematic universes, they just started to feel like franchise homework instead of escapism.
Exactly. And Disney and Marvel Studios clearly saw the internal metrics panicking, because they instituted this massive, sweeping new mantra of less is more.
Which was a long time coming.
It really was.
Mm-hmm.
They stopped flooding the market, they started releasing fewer films, and aggressively canceling minor interconnected projects that diluted the brand.
Yeah, they even pulled the plug on a second season of the Wonder Man series, right? Just to focus their financial resources on their core heavy hitters.
They did, which is incredibly ironic, actually.
Oh, totally, because Wonder Man was created by Destin Daniel Cretton, who is literally the director of Spider-Man, Brand New Day.
Right.
The studio essentially cannibalized his smaller show to clear the runway for his massive movie. But, cutting that excess narrative fat clearly worked.
It absolutely worked.
However, there's another piece to this puzzle that we have to talk about, and it's the real-world synergy that turned this movie into a mandatory cultural event.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a studio marketer's absolute dream scenario.
Oh, a total lightning in a bottle moment.
Completely. You have Tom Holland and Zendaya, who executed this massive, highly publicized, hard launch of their real-life marriage right before the premiere of the film.
Which broke the internet, by the way.
It broke everything. But it wasn't just tabloid gossip. Both of them, along with John Bernthal, who plays the Punisher in this movie, were simultaneously starring in Christopher Nolan's critically acclaimed hit film, The Odyssey.
It's like they accidentally built the ultimate marketing algorithm in real life. I mean, you are literally funneling high-art cinephiles who love The Odyssey and pop culture followers obsessed with this real-life celebrity romance straight into the same theater for a massive superhero tentpole.
It creates an inescapable cultural footprint. Everyone is talking about it.
Exactly.
But the catch is, all that real-world hype only gets you opening weekend numbers.
Yeah.
To get to $1 billion, the movie actually has to deliver on its premise.
Right. The movie actually has to be good.
Yeah. And it did that by completely pivoting away from the multiversal, cameo-stuffed spectacle of the last few movies. It zoomed way, way in on deeply personal, psychological character drama.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the foundation for this universally acclaimed movie is actually built on a comic book event that readers absolutely despised when it dropped.
Oh, disguised is almost an understatement.
To understand the emotional weight of this movie, you really have to look at its namesake, the 2008 Marvel comic run called Brand New Day.
And you cannot talk about Brand New Day without talking about the publishing earthquake that preceded it, which was One More Day.
Oh boy, yeah.
This was a storyline where Peter Parker makes a literal deal with a demonic entity to erase his marriage to Mary Jane from history, just to save his aunt.
Which is wild.
It is. The publisher instituted this because they felt a married, financially stable Spider-Man was just getting too old,
Yeah.
less relatable to younger readers. They wanted to strip away his adult responsibilities and regress him back to a struggling bachelor.
And Marvel didn't just casually roll this out. As a publishing shift, it was incredibly radical.
It was a massive gamble.
They outright canceled all their other secondary Spider-Man titles books like Sensational Spider-Man and Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and they funneled all of that creative energy exclusively into Amazing Spider-Man.
And into the flagship.
Yeah, and they started publishing it 3 times a month, which is a frankly brutal schedule for any creative team.
It is an impossible schedule if you're working traditionally. So, to pull it off, Marvel instituted a television-style writer's room format.
Oh, the Brain Trust.
Exactly. They called this group the Brain Trust, which was later rebranded as the Webheads. It featured heavyweight comic writers like Dan Slott, Mark Guggenheim, Zeb Wells, and even Bob Gale, the screenwriter who wrote Back to the Future.
Wait, really? Bob Gale?
Yeah, Bob Gale. And all of them were overseen by editor Steve Wacker.
I just love reading about their actual process in the sources because it wasn't just a corporate assembly line. It was this intense, highly communicative collaboration.
It had to be, to hit those deadlines.
Right. Writers like Joe Kelly and Dan Slott were constantly coordinating these massive overlapping plots via early email chains. They were swapping stories, leaving their egos at the door, and constantly asking like, hey, if I do this specific thing with the Rhino in my issue, is it going to ruin the script you're writing for 10 issues from now?
It's a logistical miracle that it worked.
It is. But I do have to push back on the core premise of all this effort. Wiping away a character's history, destroying a marriage fans invested decades in. I mean, isn't that just a cheap soap opera trick?
Well,
It just feels like the writers wrote themselves into a corner and hit the big red reset button because they were too lazy to write a married superhero.
that is a completely valid critique, and honestly, it is exactly how the majority of readers felt at the time. The backlash was immense.
I can imagine.
The Brain Trust knew they were operating at a massive deficit of reader goodwill. So to try and maintain respect after erasing the marriage, they actually set incredibly strict narrative rules for themselves.
Like what?
Well, for instance, they deliberately kept Peter from dating for the entire first year of the run. Even though a girl spontaneously kisses him in a nightclub in issue 546, they immediately pulled him back to show he was still fundamentally a responsible guy.
So he was unconsciously grieving a loss he couldn't even remember.
Exactly. But this raises an important question for our deep dive today. How does the 2026 film handle this incredibly messy, highly criticized comic legacy?
Right, because the movie isn't dealing with the deal with the devil. It's dealing with the fallout of the memory wipe from the movie No Way Home, where Doctor Strange cast a spell that made the whole world forget Peter Parker ever existed.
Exactly. And what director Destin Daniel Cretton does so brilliantly is he takes that contrived, magical memory wipe, and he strictly enforces the psychological consequences of it.
He doesn't let Peter off the hook.
Not at all. He turns it into a profound exploration of grief and utter isolation. It asks you, the viewer, to really consider what it actually looks like when a young man is completely forgotten by everyone he loves, but still has to carry the burden of saving them.
And what it looks like is incredibly bleak. I mean, when you catch up with Peter in this movie, he is entirely alone. He is operating out of this incredibly scuzzy, cluttered Queens apartment that basically functions as a depression nest.
It's so claustrophobic.
It really is. He has 0 friends. The only entities he communicates with are random delivery drivers bringing him food and his suit's AI assistant, Evie, who is voiced with this chillingly detached calm by Naomi Watts.
Our voice work is so haunting in this.
Yeah.
He is using the mask, the Spider-Man persona, and an absolute crutch to avoid dealing with Peter Parker's devastating reality.
Yeah.
He is deliberately overworking himself to suppress his trauma.
Yeah.
And this is where the film takes a massive, unexpected swing. The psychological toll of this isolation actually begins to trigger a terrifying physical mutation in Peter's powers.
Wait, let's talk about this body horror, because in a Disney-distributed Marvel film, this is shocking.
It's a huge risk.
It is so visceral. Peter's eyes literally start turning pitch black. His senses become painfully heightened to the point where the city noise is causing him sheer sensory overload.
The sound design in those scenes is phenomenal.
And, in a brilliant nod to the Sam Raimi films and the 2005 comic storyline The Other, he starts violently shooting organic webs directly out of his wrists instead of using his mechanical shooters.
Which reviewers, like Peter Bradshaw at The Guardian, noted pushes the film firmly into the David Cronenberg zone of body horror.
But what is the mechanical purpose of that? Like, why organic webs? To me, it feels like it symbolizes a terrifying loss of his intellect.
How do you mean?
Well, he used his genius to build those mechanical web shooters, and now, under extreme psychological stress, that rational human mind is being overridden by base, primal, animal instincts.
That is a phenomenal read on it. If you've ever felt completely invisible in a crowded room or overwhelmed by a new environment, you understand a fraction of what Peter is going through.
It's like if you imagine a college freshman who moves to a massive new city where absolutely nobody knows him.
Right.
He's totally isolated, the depression is creeping in, he's barely sleeping. Except, instead of just dealing with normal loneliness, this freshman has the crushing weight of saving New York City on his shoulders every single night, and his own biology is actively rebelling against him.
It perfectly equates psychological trauma with physical mutation. Peter initially looks at these changes, the black eyes, the organic webs, and he thinks he's becoming a literal monster.
He is horrified by his own reflection in the mirror.
He is. It forces you to ask, at what point does total self-sacrifice cross the line into self-destruction?
And because he is losing control of himself, both mentally and physically, he can't exactly go knocking on the Avengers' pristine front doors for help. He can't go to Captain America with this darkness.
No, they wouldn't understand.
So his alienation naturally pushes him toward a much grittier, darker network of allies on the fringes of the city. Which brings us to a phrase I absolutely love from the Black Nerd Problems review, the cinematic kudzu.
Cinematic kudzu is such a great term. It refers to how the MCU endlessly vines and wraps into itself, often choking the main narrative.
Right.
But this movie is absolutely packed with MCU characters, and remarkably, it manages them perfectly because they all serve Peter's specific thematic journey.
They really do. I mean, you have Yelena Belova, played by Florence Pugh, operating as the new Black Widow out of this atmospheric underground New York bathhouse.
She's great in this.
And you've got Mark Ruffalo returning, but the Hulk has completely regressed. He's not the calm, cardigan-wearing smart Hulk anymore. He has reverted back to a terrifying, unpredictable Savage Hulk.
And we have to unpack why Savage Hulk is there. It's not just a cameo for the trailer.
Right.
Fighting alongside a Savage Hulk perfectly reflects Peter's own terrifying loss of control. He is looking at this giant, raging monster and wondering if that is his inevitable future as his own animal instincts take over.
That makes perfect sense. And speaking of terrifying futures, we have to talk about Jon Bernthal's Punisher.
Yes, Frank Castle.
He is operating out of a converted industrial houseboat called the Golden Girl. But I have a serious bone to pick with the Punisher's inclusion here.
Oh.
Yeah. Frank Castle is an ultra-violent, R-rated, swearing, lethal vigilante. How on earth do you justify putting that guy into a PG-13 Spider-Man movie without totally sanitizing and ruining the core of the character? At first glance, it feels like corporate synergy just forcing a square peg into a round hole.
It's a completely fair concern.
Yeah.
Tom Holland actually admitted in several interviews that integrating the Punisher was a massive tonal challenge for the production.
I bet.
But they found these brilliant, character-driven workarounds that acknowledge Frank Castle's brutal nature without actually breaking the film's rating.
Oh, the gag where Frank tries to drop a massive R-rated swear word in the middle of a firefight, and Spidey just reflexively shoots a web over his mouth to shut him up. My theater was absolutely dying laughing at that.
It's hilarious, yeah. But beyond the physical comedy, there is immense narrative brilliance to Frank Castle being in this specific story.
Else.
Well, the Punisher serves as a dark mirror for Peter. Frank is entirely isolated, driven only by his mission, and totally disconnected from normal humanity. He shows Peter exactly the kind of lonely, traumatized, isolated monster he will permanently become if he continues down this solitary path of violent vigilantism.
Oh, wow. He is literally the ghost of Christmas future for Peter Parker.
Exactly.
But the allies aren't the only ones reflecting Peter's trauma. we have to look at the primary antagonist tying this gritty underworld together. Sadie Sink steps into the MCU as the mutant Jean Grey.
And she is a revelation in the role. But what's crucial here is that she isn't in a yellow spandex X-Men suit trying to save the world.
Right.
And she isn't trying to conquer the globe either. She's a desperate telepath searching for her sister, Sarah.
Right. Sarah has been taken by the Department of Damage Control, which is being run with this chilling bureaucracy by Bill Metzger, played by Trammell Tillman.
Yes. And to find her sister, Jean is using her telepathy to literally possess the minds of established villains.
Like Scorpion.
Right, most notably Michael Mando's Scorpion, forcing them to do her dirty work and tear the city apart, looking for clues.
The mechanics of that conflict are so smart.
Yeah.
Because Peter is already dealing with his mind fracturing from grief and isolation, and now he is forced to fight a villain who literally invades and manipulates the mind. But Jean Grey isn't inherently evil, is she?
No, and that is where Destin Daniel Cretton's thematic brilliance shines. Introducing mutants into the MCU via a lonely, hurting teenager perfectly mirrors Peter's own youth and trauma.
That's a great parallel.
Cretton specifically noted that having a desperate kid as the antagonist solidified the entire theme of the movie. Jean doesn't think she's a villain. She's just a traumatized kid lashing out at a world that took everything from her, which is exactly what Peter is on the verge of doing himself.
They are two sides of the exact same coin. But, for all the Savage Hulks and body horror mutations and telepathic possessions, the true heart of this movie, the thing that actually saves it from just being a depressing, edgy superhero punch fest, relies entirely on a character who has absolutely no superpowers at all.
We are talking, of course, about Zendaya's MJ.
Yes. Amidst all this gritty underworld chaos, we catch up with MJ and Ned, played by Jacob Batalon.
Right, they're off at college.
Yeah, they are at MIT sharing a college apartment. And because of Doctor Strange's spell from the previous film, they have absolutely no idea who Peter Parker is. But they do know that Spider-Man saved their lives back in high school. So Ned, being the tech genius he is, has created this Spidey Tracker app to try and locate the hero so they can properly thank him.
Which naturally creates this agonizing, torturous proximity for Peter. Because he is tracking the app, he can see them. He can watch from the rooftops as they live their lives, but he cannot cross that threshold and be part of it without risking their safety.
It's so sad.
And to make matters infinitely worse for Peter's fragile mental state, MJ has a new boyfriend.
The angst is just off the charts. I mean, you can physically feel Peter's heart breaking every time he looks through their window. And what I found so interesting in behind-the-scenes sources we looked at is that Zendaya actually insisted on doing an MJ pass to the script before filming began.
That's right. She read an early draft and felt that as MJ was maturing into a polished college student, the writers had accidentally scrubbed away all her eccentricities.
Yeah, she wanted to ensure the character retained that signature, awkward, slightly cynical edge that made audiences fall in love with her back in Homecoming.
Which is so important.
It is so vital to the story, because if MJ just becomes a generic, perfect love interest, Peter's sacrifice means nothing. He doesn't just miss a girl, he misses her with all her specific weirdness and humor.
Exactly. Critics universally agreed that her grounded, mature performance is what anchors the entire film. It keeps this massive blockbuster rooted firmly in humanity.
So what does this all mean? To me, it is just incredible that in a summer blockbuster featuring a physically mutating Spider-Man fighting alongside the Punisher and the Savage Hulk against a telepathic mutant, the absolute most compelling scenes in the entire runtime are just two normal college kids sitting in a dorm room.
It's wild.
They are just trying to figure out why they have this lingering, unexplainable feeling that something massive is missing from their lives.
Because that is the core of the character. The magic of Spider-Man has never been the organic webs or the green screen explosions or the expansive robes gallery.
Oh.
It's the deeply relatable human suffering beneath the mask. The stark contrast between Peter's monstrous, isolated, Cronenberg-esque superhero existence and MJ's completely normal, grounded civilian life. That contrast is what highlights the ultimate tragedy of Peter Parker. He willingly gave up his humanity so that she could keep hers.
Man, that is heavy. But it's so true. This movie pulled off a cinematic miracle. It managed to balance massive MCU world building. It formally introduced mutants. It gave Peter a terrifying physical and psychological evolution. And somehow, through all of that, it maintained an incredibly deep emotional resonance.
It's a huge achievement.
They took one of the messiest, most actively disliked comic book resets in publishing history and spun it into a mature, billion-dollar box office juggernaut.
It really is a masterclass in adaptation. It proves that the studio finally understands what audiences actually crave when they go to the theater, which is genuine emotional stakes, not just higher pixel counts and holo cameos.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We've spent all this time looking at how the intense trauma and total isolation in this movie physically mutated Peter into something darker, something far more spider-like and unsettling. He has essentially embraced the monster within himself just to survive the gritty streets of New York.
Right.
But what is going to happen when this new, violent, organic, web-shooting Peter Parker inevitably has to stand shoulder to shoulder with the pristine, polished, billionaire heroes of the new Avengers? When that day comes and they look at what he's become, will they see him as a hero or will they see a monster?
Thanks for tuning in to Movie Deep Dive on Binge Radio. Make sure to subscribe and discover more cinema discussions.